Hey everybody, welcome back to Waffle Capital. Today we're going to be discussing greenhouse gas emissions regarding transportation. Kick us off with Jessica.
All right. So, obviously, as we know, greenhouse gases and emissions are a true problem that we're facing, right? Global warming is at an all-time high. We saw this summer a lot of wildfires, huge strengths in rainstorms, which is obviously not normal. And so we were wondering, what are our governments doing about it? And more importantly, what are organizations around the world doing about it? Obviously, we know of the 2050 Paris Agreement, with almost every country in the globe participating in it, aiming to hit carbon neutral for their country emission-wise by the end of 2050. How is this taking place? Well, transportation is very interesting in terms of how it develops, right? Because while we have transportation on a private side, so our cars, how we move around as a society, there's also a competition side of transportation, just racing, literally. And that's mostly where we get our developments from. So we implement various technological advances, for example, in series such as Formula One, very famous sport, which has recently brought in hybrid engines, very efficient engines, most efficient engines ever created by the humankind. And Formula One as an organization aims to hit carbon neutral by 2030 through the use of biofuels, recyclable tires made by Pirelli, and it's not only to F1, right? We have series such as the Fanatec GT World Challenge and WEC, which race in races such as the 24 Hours of Le Mans. We're doing this as well. But I mean, there's plenty of other sides of transportation, such as the public side, which are also helping. So do you guys have any examples for how that's helping maybe, and what do you think about it especially?
Yes, so basically, as you all know, Tesla is a very up and coming, it's already up there, a very famous company for its electric cars, which I think is very beneficial to the sustainability of the future. As we know, it's become more and more popular with different companies because people support the goal of becoming, carbon neutral,
right,
and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, which I think is important if we want to make big steps towards, the reduction of greenhouse gases.
For sure.
I think we said before about Formula One's influence on racing as a whole. Most of R&D regarding cars starts from there.
Exactly.
The example you made before was perfect. You said Formula One. The transition to hybrid engine in 2014, it's a step towards electric cars and carbon neutral travel. And as you know, this is just a fact, but Formula One engines, hybrid engines, are 50% efficiency, whilst the most modern car engines are 35%. This was prior to electric and hybrid engines. And as we can see over the past 10 years, there's been almost 10 years since they were implemented. There are way more hybrid cars than there were before, and it's a step in the right direction.
Right. And what do you guys think of electric cars in general? Because I have a very interesting statistic taken by Volvo. So it's inside a research project that they had within their facility. So their car model, the XC40, which is like a small family SUV, they make electric version and one with a natural engine, like a petrol engine. And what they found is that actually, in order to overtake in emissions the carbon engine had to do roughly 98,000 kilometers before it overtook the electric car in emissions due to the emission cost that these cars bring. And this is not even mentioning how much carbon emissions are going to be needed to take off the lithium batteries and take care of them and properly store them. So what do you think of electric cars in general? Do you think it's a viable option for the future, or should our governments and organizations be looking at other options such as biofuels that Porsche is developing?
I have a very subjective view on this, obviously, because I happen to be someone who's pretty passionate about sports cars. Therefore, I love gas-powered engines, combustion engines. There's lots of aspects that electric cars just lack. For example, the sound aspect. I think that's just incredibly important to me. So I think we should answer this question.
Are you talking about like racing or just in general?
No, I mean, we can talk about the racing aspect, but what do you think? Like, do you think electric cars as a whole? Because you mentioned Tesla before as well. Do you think, as a whole, they're a viable option for consumer level cars?
I think they're a very viable option. Although as we know, like the infrastructure necessary to support the electric vehicles
Yeah.
needs to improve. That's another like process in which will require a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, but I think it's a very, very achievable,
Goal.
I think very effective goal to implement if we want to, contribute to the betterness of the world.
Right.
But I think electric vehicles are very, very important. Obviously, to the racing aspect, I think, of course, the race car passions like you guys.
Yeah, of course.
Gas powered cars might be more,
Yeah.
popular to the public, but
Yeah. And I mean, okay, now moving on, let's talk about another side of this, which is the human aspect and social aspect of this issue and how it's being advertised as such a pressing issue. So, for example, the Stop Oil protests. Do you guys have any opinions on them? For, like, the one time, for example, they stopped the cooking oil truck instead of a petrol truck. Do you guys have any?
personally, I think these protests are quite useless. I think if you want to really make a difference, I think you either put yourself in a position where you can impact the world in a positive way, or you do protests that aren't as radical or as politically, what do you say?
Politically extreme, maybe.
Exactly. Because I think this kind of brings a negative. Obviously, they're trying to get their message out.
Yeah.
I think in some ways, sure, it gets out.
Yeah.
But I don't think it gets out in the right way. If we really want to make a difference, I think we need to start maybe implementing people, like specific sectors in the government that target this
Yeah,
and
right.
things like that. But I don't think personally protests for me are the solution to
Right,
the
so
problem.
yeah, maybe stopping actual oil trucks would be
Exactly.
like a step in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think some of these protests also damaging the infrastructure in cities. For example, for us in Milano, they damaged the Duomo with the spray paint, which I thought was quite dumb because they didn't have gasoline back when they made the statues.
What do you guys think about how much potential biofuels have?
I think it's quite interesting.
It's like it's a combustion, but
Yeah, I think it's a quite viable option, especially in the sector that we're here right now, aviation sector. Biofuels are taking great effect. For example, the KLM Air France group is now switching completely to biofuels. That being aviation fuels, obviously, which are needed to a much lower scale. But I think biofuels, what it allows society and governments in general to do is be able to spend less resources on creating new infrastructure for example, electric cars, and be able to use infrastructure that already exists, such as gas stops along highways and whatever. You don't need to change them and turn them into electric powered ones and just have the infrastructure already there for it. I think it's quite an interesting topic as well, as it's an infinite resource and great, so it's quite cool, I think, to explore. What do you think, Luca?
I think biofuels is a very, very viable option.
Mhm.
I think the fact that it does produce less greenhouse gas emissions is why people are
Looking
ultimately
towards it.
looking towards it. Although obviously it's not fully
Developed,
carbon neutral, but I think with efficiency improvements and things like that, I think biofuel can be much more popular in the future.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, also, as I already spoke before, the problem with electric cars is such, which cars with biofuels and hydrogen, for example, don't have, is you need somewhere to store the batteries after the car stops, right? And we don't have any way to store or reuse lithium as of right now on grand and mass scales, which is what we're going to need if we don't want to repeat what's happening today with normal cars and just scrap them.
I think we can go back to talking about Formula One here, regarding biofuels.
Right.
There's regulations that every single year a greater fraction of fuels in Formula One contains ethanol,
Right.
which is way more. It's not completely carbon neutral, but it's more carbon friendly respected to regular gasoline. And also in regular fuel in the streets. I don't know if you guys pay attention, but sometimes like gas stations have like special fuels that have ethanol or other ecologically friendly
Right, yeah.
substances that improve that aspect.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the way forward is to start implementing these solutions drastically in series such as F1 in order to be able to move at a faster pace, let's say, in the real world, because we are running out of time, as being said by the old protesters.
Yeah.
Although I don't think it's quite as extreme as they put it. It's not an existential crisis like they're putting it. We'll be fine. I think positivity is needed, and government unifiedness is also.
Related to what you said, what do you think are like some steps the government can take to encourage consumers to maybe switch to, more carbon neutral alternatives? Like if you were in charge of these, I think government sectors, what would you guys do?
I think one of the first steps would be investing in public transportation.
Right.
Because if public transportation improves, people are more incentivized to resort to that instead of using regular transportation.
For sure.
First of all, all the obvious reasons. More people are using the same vehicle, which may not be faster. Thus, less people around using fuel for themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have two other ones, which is apart from because the problem with that being short range, like public transportation, let's say within the city, I think what it also allows the government to do is to invest in bike paths. So we see in the Netherlands, through their history, they've invested greatly in bikes, and it's paid off now where there are more bikes than people in Amsterdam. Obviously, bikes don't consume any carbon when you ride them, so that's great. And also another thing the Italian government is already doing, which I think is great, is giving bonuses to people who drive electric cars, right? You don't have to pay, for example, for the highway, or there's discounts on electric vehicles,
Definitely.
which I think is definitely good.
I think something else that can be done is, this is more short term. So obviously it was going to take a long time for the majority of people to switch to electric vehicles. And what wastes most fuel with gas-powered vehicles are, the starts and stops. So a simple way to approach this would be to improve the trafficking systems.
Or it's like remove traffic lights.
No, just have more synchronized trafficking systems, so there's less stopping and starting again.
Yeah, so just take off the. Okay, makes sense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that was it for today. We appreciate you coming back. I know it's been a while. Hope you've missed us. I've missed them. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next
Please leave a comment if you want to share your opinion, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, please leave some suggestions for future episodes. We want to provide what you guys want to see.
Yes.
So if you guys give us suggestions, we will, turn them into products.
Yeah.